Alright, so there are a few topics that have not been covered but are on your assessment next week that we should have seen so far. But what I want to do is make sure that we got the basics. It's also advantageous for us to go ahead and get a head start on some skills that are part of a very difficult process. This video should be quick, but again, you have to make sure you work for understanding. Again, the homework today is not a true homework assignment, but it must be completed before you can do anything else. It is about, I think, 10, 11 questions long, and it pretty much just covers the stuff that we're talking about here, plus some other things that I think are important for you to just kind of review before you get back to the other information. Domain and range we've discussed already. Before this chapter, we learned that domain was X and range was Y. I told you that if you alphabetize the words domain and range, since D goes first before R and X goes before Y, that's pretty much how they linked up. Next week's assessment is going to give you a quadratic function and ask you for the domain and range of that specific function. As long as you've studied up on your mastery up to this point, it shouldn't be too tough to answer. If you haven't, then you better get to work before next week, because you're going to need to understand some things about the quadratic functions in order to do this. When they want the domain range of the function, the best thing to do is to draw a cheap sketch of the function. This one here, and that should be 3x squared, by the way. But this one here, 3x squared plus 4, remember that this value, which I've tried my best to teach you, tells me where it crosses the y-axis, and so therefore you know that you should be going up 4, and that should be your vertex. And then after that you have a negative 3, which means that this is a sad parabola, which means it opens this way, and so you get a parabola something like this. Again, domain means how far can you go, or what values are acceptable going this way. Range means what values are being used this way. Here's the thing, in terms of x's, you can plug in anything you want for x, and so there's really nothing that you can't have on this, and so your domain is going to be all real numbers. Again, I'll discuss that whenever we get to that on the computer part, but your range is the part you need to pay attention to. Notice that this goes all the way up to the value of 4 and then comes down, and so your answer is going to be y, because it's going to be 4, 3, 2, 1, everything less than 4 and equal to 4. It's going to be that y is less than or equal to the value of 4. That is your range. Again, there's never going to be, if this is your maximum point of the parabola, there's not going to be anything above that point, and 4 is the number that it stops at, so that would be your domain, or your range. Okay. Again, if you look at B and you have this graph, this tells me that it crosses at negative 2. This tells me that it opens up. It's a happy parabola, so it's going to look something like this. Again, in terms of domain, any x is possible. It goes on forever in both directions, so your domain is all real numbers. But your range, in this case, is negative 2, negative 1, and everything above that, which means that y is going to be greater than or equal to negative 2. Again, the equal to part has to be there because it is actually going to touch the negative 2, but it's not going to ever be anything smaller than negative 2. Again, it won't be 3, 4, 5, because if this is the minimum point of that parabola, that's as low as it's going to go. So again, when you get some practice on that today, just make sure you study it, take some good notes, and make sure you're ready for it again when it pops up. Again, it's going to be on next week's test. Trajectory and maximum height. Part of our experience with parabolas includes our ability to use those parabolas to approximate trajectory of an object that's been catapulted or thrown from a source. The general formula is this, where h represents the height. Again, you don't need to memorize that, so don't even write it. H represents the height, t is the number of seconds, and v represents the initial velocity, c represents the initial height of the object. Again, you don't have to memorize it, but you do have to understand it. So let's just go ahead and get to it and see what we're talking about here. The formula again is h equals negative 16 t squared minus vt plus c. And it says an object is shot from a catapult from 7 feet above with an initial upward velocity of 88 feet per second. What is the maximum height of the object? How long does it take for it to get there? Again, the first thing we have to do is kind of figure out what these letters are going to be. It's from a height of 7 feet. Again, that means it's shot from a catapult for 7 feet above, which means that your c is going to be 7. And again, it says upward velocity of 88 feet per second, which means your 88 is v. And so we end up with the equation negative 16 t squared minus 88t plus 7. Alright, that is what we get after with all the information that we have here. And once we do this, we now have to find the maximum height and also the time it takes. But remember that maximum, anything you want that's key information, typically is found from the key x, which means you're going to do your x equals negative b over 2a. Notice b is negative 88. I'm sorry, it should be plus. That should be a plus. But b is 88, and so therefore you're going to put a negative 88 up there. And then 16 doubled is negative 32. And when you do negative 88 divided by 32, or just 88 divided by 32, you get 2.75. That, again, is not the max height. That is the value of x that leads you to the max height. And so what we do now is we plug it back in. And we see what that answer is. So negative 16 times 2.75 squared plus 88 times 2.75 plus 7 gives me the answer of 128. That means the height, the max height, is 128 feet. And when it says how long does it take, well, remember, if you're talking about a graph, it's talking about something doing this here. This is the height, but this would be your amount of time. And so the number you're looking for that leads to that height is your key x. And so therefore, how long does it take to reach that max height? It takes 2.75 seconds to reach that max height. So again, your max height is the number that you get that's actually your y. The time it takes is your x, because that is time going forward. Again, something is shot up in the air and time starts and starts and starts, and then it hits the ground and time stops. So again, that's what you're looking at. That's what you need to practice. Just make sure, again, that you get something out of it today. You don't have to be perfect at it today, but just try your best to understand it. Again, take the notes, study the notes, and be ready when it pops back up. Again, in this case, the formula is negative 16 t squared plus vt plus c. Another object is shot from a height of 5 feet, initial upward velocity of 104 feet per second. Again, 5 feet is where it was shot from. 104 feet per second means that goes here. And so my formula is negative 16t squared plus 104t plus 5. Again, if I am looking for the max height, first thing I have to do is find my key x, which is negative b over 2a, which is going to be negative 104 over negative 32 again. 104 divided by 32 gives me 3.25. Again, that is not the max height. That's actually how long it will take. So that's one of our answers. But in terms of your max height, you want to go ahead and plug that in there. So negative 16 times 3.25 squared plus 104 times 3.25 plus 5 is what we're going to figure out. And it gives me an answer of 174. So the max height is 174, and it would take this long, 3.25 seconds, to get to that height. So again, when you see that on your work today, just make sure you try to figure out what's going on with that. It's only about 2 of them that you have to do, but again, those 2 are your introduction to that question, and you'll start seeing it on all your homework for next week and give you a chance to try to see what's going on. The last thing is the quadratic formula. The formula is going to have to be memorized, so I'm introducing it to you now. I would write it down, and I would try my best to start memorizing it now, because again, you don't want to try to start memorizing it on Wednesday or Tuesday with the test on Thursday. Instead, I'm giving you a week to kind of start getting this in your head. Notice that your key x formula, negative b over 2a, is in there. Also notice that b squared minus 4ac stuff that I made you work with is in there. And so again, there are parts in there that are already kind of useful and that you've already seen, but you have to learn what the format of it is. Again, it's x equals negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a, and again, everything needs to be over that 2a. For now, what you're going to do, because I'm not going to have you do it yet, I'm just going to introduce you to it and try to start working on your skills. I'm just going to have you evaluate a complex set of numbers. Be sure to take these problems seriously. Again, don't just guess, because there are multiple choice questions on it. But if you don't take advantage of this time, then you're not going to get better at it. So again, this is my way of helping you learn it in pieces, and I'm only asking you to do the calculator portion. So what you want to do when you do the calculator portion is 3 pieces. First thing you want to do is simplify the parts here. So negative 3 turns into 3. Second thing you want to do is ignore the root and type in exactly what's under the root, exactly the way you see it. So negative 3 squared minus 4 parentheses negative 6 parentheses 7 gives me the number of 177, and then all over negative 12. So again, I simplify that part. I type in what's under the root. Again, under the root, don't type the root in, and then I simplify the bottom. The next thing you do is, you already should have done this type of question, is you type in what's on the top. 3 plus square root of 177 equals, and then divided by negative 12, and it's that simple. Your answer is negative 1.36. Again, that's all it is. Simplify the first number, simplify what's under the root. Again, do not type the root in. Simplify the bottom, then you type in what's on the top, hit equals, and then divide by whatever is on the bottom. And that is all. Again, you should notice that you've done these skills already, because I was already ahead of you on that. I knew that you were going to have to do it. So on this one, again, this turns into a negative 7 plus, again, I write the root, I type what's under the root, parentheses 7 squared minus 4 parentheses negative 2 parentheses 10. That gives me the answer of 129, and so that goes under here. On the bottom, I end up with negative 4, and again, from there, we've been trained on how to do that. Just type in what's on the top, negative 7 plus square root of 129 equals, and then divided by negative 4, which gives me negative 1.09. And so with that being done, the rest of the day, again, take some time to answer those questions, those quick questions on your Math Excel. Again, don't cheat yourself. If you have a question on what's going on, please ask. I'm actually going to shorten it because I didn't think the video would be this long. But like I said, just go ahead and answer those questions real quick to make sure that you see what you're doing. Don't cheat your way through it, and then get back to your review for the quiz tomorrow. And other than that, we're good. Good luck.